And then I said gently, "Sweetheart, Oscar came to say goodbye. Wherever he was all this time, he passed away last night. He wanted you to know he's okay now. That's why you felt his paws, heard his meow, and felt him brush against you. He was letting you know that he loves you." A few nights later, something even more extraordinary happened. I was sitting on the couch, relaxing, when I heard it, a faint, rhythmic sound. My breath caught. It was Charlie's nails clicking against the hardwood floor. It was so soft, almost like an echo, but I recognized it immediately. Tears filled my eyes as I sat there, listening. I didn't see him, but I could feel him. His presence was so strong, as if he was right there, walking beside me, just like he always had. Daisy passed away one quiet afternoon, sitting peacefully in her favourite spot by the window. I was heartbroken. The house felt so quiet without her playful whistles and mischievous chatter. I couldn't bring myself to move her cage from the living room. It felt too final, like letting go of her entirely. A week after Daisy passed, I was sitting on the couch, lost in my sadness. I was surrounded by love and peace as he passed. I was devastated. The stable felt so empty without the familiar sound of Thunder's hooves or his soft neighs when I arrived. I couldn't bring myself to ride another horse. It felt like no one could ever take his place. My heart felt shattered, and I didn't know how I'd move forward without him. A few weeks later, I decided to visit the paddock. Welcome to Pets in the Afterlife. Today I'm sharing something truly special. 4 powerful stories about the incredible signs people have received from their pets after they've passed. These stories are told with care to help you feel the emotions and connections these owners experienced. Each story I'll share with you today is powerful in its own way. Some are gentle, like a subtle sign that makes you feel they're still with you, even though they've gone, while others are vivid and unforgettable, bringing undeniable comfort to those who experience them. Whether you've felt a connection with your pet after they've passed, are wondering if the subtle signs you've noticed are real, or if you are losing your beloved pet and wondering whether they'll give you signs, stay with me through all 4. You might find a story that feels like it was meant just for you. Let's dive into the first story, which is about my own daughter and her beloved cat, Oscar. Years ago, my daughter adopted a playful tabby cat named Oscar. With his bright eyes and adventurous spirit, he quickly became a cherished part of her life. Oscar loved to roam and explore the world beyond the front door, but he always found his way back to her. When my daughter moved to a new house, Oscar adjusted well, exploring his new neighbourhood with curiosity. It became routine for him to disappear for a few hours each day, only to return home with a contented meow and a rub against her legs. But one day, Oscar didn't come home. My daughter was devastated. She searched tirelessly, calling his name, putting up flyers and asking neighbours, but there was no sign of him. Weeks turned into months, and eventually years passed with no answers. Though life moved on, she never stopped wondering what had happened to him or hoping, deep down, that he was safe and happy somewhere. Until now, my daughter was lying in bed, halfway between sleep and wakefulness, when she felt something unusual. It was the distinct sensation of small paws pressing gently on the blankets, walking toward her legs, something Oscar used to do. At first, she thought it was her dog, Bella, climbing onto the bed. But as she opened her eyes, she remembered that Bella was sleeping in the laundry room. Confused, she lay there in the dark, her heart beating faster. It felt so real. She tried to convince herself it was her imagination and eventually drifted back to sleep. The next morning, as she went about her day, she heard Oscar's meow. It wasn't loud or drawn out, but soft and distinct, like the way he used to greet her. She turned toward the sound, her breath catching, but there was no one there. Moments later, while standing in the kitchen, she felt a soft brush against her leg, like the fleeting touch of fur. She looked down, expecting to see Bella, but again, there was nothing. That afternoon, she called me. Her voice was shaky, a mix of confusion and emotion. "Mum, I think Oscar visited me last night. I felt paws on the bed. I heard his meow this morning, and I even felt him brush against my leg. Am I imagining things?" I listened as she explained everything, and then I said gently, "Sweetheart, Oscar came to say goodbye. Wherever he was all this time, he passed away last night. He wanted you to know he's okay now. That's why you felt his paws, heard his meow, and felt him brush against you. He was letting you know that he loves you." There was silence on the line as she processed my words. "Do you really think it was him?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I do," I replied. "He found his way back to you, even after all these years, to let you know he's at peace and still connected to you in spirit." We both were crying, overcome by the depth of this moment. I could hear the mix of emotions in her voice: relief, sadness, love, and awe. It was as if years of uncertainty and heartache had suddenly lifted, replaced by the warmth of knowing Oscar had found his way back to her, even if only in spirit. Through the tears, she said, "I feel like he's telling me to stop worrying and let go of the guilt. He's okay now, isn't he?" "Yes," I said, my own voice trembling. "He's more than okay. He's free and he's at peace. But most importantly, he wanted you to know how much he loves you. He wouldn't have visited otherwise." As I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but reflect on the countless stories I've come across in my decades of research into the afterlife. Among the many heartfelt accounts, the ones from owners who have lost their beloved pets always stand out as some of the most touching and profound. These connections, these signs, whether subtle or unmistakable, remind us of the unbreakable bond we share with our pets, a bond that even death cannot sever. Before I get to the second story, just want to add, if you've experienced something similar, I'd love to hear your story. Your experience could help others find comfort in their grief. Please check the description of this video or channel for details on how to share your story with me. These stories have the power to bring hope and healing to so many people. Story 2, missing my beautiful beagle dog, Charlie. I had a beagle dog named Charlie, and he was my shadow. Wherever I went, Charlie was always by my side, whether it was a walk in the park, relaxing on the couch, or sleeping at the end of my bed. Charlie wasn't just a pet. He was my protector, my confidant, and my best friend. When Charlie turned 10, he was diagnosed with cancer. I tried everything to give him the best care possible, but the disease progressed quickly. On his final day, I stayed home from work so I could be with him. We lay together on the living room floor, and I whispered to him about all the adventures we'd shared and how much I loved him. As the sun set that evening, Charlie took his last breath in my arms. I was heartbroken. My home felt so empty without him. The silence was unbearable. No sound of his paws following me from room to room. No gentle nudges asking for attention. I couldn't bring myself to put away his favourite blanket. It stayed on the couch right where he used to sleep. Sometimes I'd catch myself talking to him, even though I knew he wasn't there. About 2 weeks after Charlie passed, I decided to go for a walk along the trail we used to explore together. It was something we did almost every day, and I thought it might help me feel closer to him. As I walked, lost in my thoughts, I felt it. Something light and fleeting brushed against my leg. It was exactly like the way Charlie used to nudge me when he wanted me to keep moving. I stopped in my tracks, my heart racing, and looked around, but there was no one else on the trail. It was a quiet, still morning. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind or maybe my imagination, but a few moments later, I saw something that made me stop again. Lying on the path ahead of me was a stick. It wasn't just any stick, it was short, chewed up, and looked exactly like the ones Charlie used to carry on our walks. It felt so familiar, like it had been placed there for me. I bent down, picked it up, and carried it with me for the rest of the walk, clutching it tightly in my hand. A few nights later, something even more extraordinary happened. I was sitting on the couch, relaxing, when I heard it, a faint, rhythmic sound. My breath caught. It was Charlie's nails clicking against the hardwood floor. It was so soft, almost like an echo, but I recognized it immediately. Tears filled my eyes as I sat there, listening. I didn't see him, but I could feel him. His presence was so strong, as if he was right there, walking beside me, just like he always had. When I told a friend about these experiences, they smiled and said, "It sounds like Charlie hasn't left your side." And I believe that. It was Charlie's way of reminding me that he's still with me, still watching over me. Though I still miss him every day, those moments brought me so much comfort and peace. For Stacey, these signs were undeniable. The brush on her leg, the stick on the trail, and the familiar sound of his footsteps were Charlie's way of reminding her that he hadn't left her side. Though she still missed him deeply, these moments brought her comfort and peace, helping her realise that the love they shared would always be a part of her life. Next, let me share the story of Sophia and her parrot Daisy, whose mischievous personality and vibrant presence found a way to shine through even after she was gone. I've always loved birds, but when I adopted Daisy, a vibrant green parrot with the biggest personality, I knew I had found my soulmate. Daisy wasn't just smart, she was incredible. She could mimic my laugh perfectly and would constantly chirp, "You're my best friend," every time she saw me. She loved to perch on my shoulder while I worked and had this quirky habit of whistling the tune to Happy Birthday every single morning. Daisy brought so much joy into my life. For 18 beautiful years, she was my companion. But as she got older, her energy began to fade. She stopped eating as much, and she didn't chatter like she used to. Despite my best efforts and frequent trips to the vet, Daisy passed away one quiet afternoon, sitting peacefully in her favourite spot by the window. I was heartbroken. The house felt so quiet without her playful whistles and mischievous chatter. I couldn't bring myself to move her cage from the living room. It felt too final, like letting go of her entirely. A week after Daisy passed, I was sitting on the couch, lost in my sadness, when I heard it. It was faint but unmistakable, her whistle. She was whistling Happy Birthday, just like she used to do every morning. My heart stopped and I froze. I turned toward her cage, expecting to see her, but of course it was empty. Tears welled up in my eyes as I sat there stunned. The sound didn't come again, but it had felt so real. At first I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. Maybe I just wanted to hear her so badly that my mind had made it up. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just in my head. It was exactly the way Daisy used to whistle, and it brought me an unexpected sense of comfort, even if I couldn't explain it. A few days later, I was cleaning my desk when I found something that made me stop in my tracks. A small green feather tucked beneath some papers. It was one of Daisy's feathers. I had cleaned the desk several times since she passed, and I was certain it hadn't been there before. Holding the feather in my hand, I felt an overwhelming sense of her presence. It was like she had left me a gift, one final way to say, "I'm still here." The last sign came when I visited my mum's house. We were sitting in the garden when I heard a wild parrot in the distance. It let out a laugh that was identical to Daisy's, so playful, so mischievous. I couldn't believe it. I smiled, tears filling my eyes again, because it felt like Daisy was sending me one last playful message from beyond. That laugh was her way of saying goodbye, in the cheeky way only she could. Sophia didn't consider herself a spiritual person, but these signs were too personal and specific to ignore. The whistle, the feather, and the laugh were reminders of Daisy's unique personality and the love they shared. While she missed Daisy deeply, these moments reassured her that her beloved parrot spirit was still with her, bringing light and joy even from the other side. Our final story is shared by someone who has chosen to remain anonymous. Many people like her want to share their experiences but don't feel comfortable attaching their name or real identity. Even so, they want their story to be heard because it's a way to honour the connection they shared with their pet. I grew up around horses, but none of them captured my heart the way Thunder did. He was a majestic black stallion with a striking white streak down his nose. From the moment we met, I knew he was special. Thunder wasn't just my horse. He was my partner, my confidant, and my source of strength during some of the hardest times in my life. We spent over 15 years together exploring trails, competing in shows, and sharing quiet moments in the stable. As Thunder aged, he developed a degenerative joint condition. It broke my heart to see him struggle, and despite all my efforts to manage his pain, his condition worsened. When his quality of life declined significantly, I had to make the hardest decision of my life. On a crisp autumn morning, I said goodbye to Thunder in his favourite paddock under the sprawling oak tree where he loved to stand. He was surrounded by love and peace as he passed. I was devastated. The stable felt so empty without the familiar sound of Thunder's hooves or his soft neighs when I arrived. I couldn't bring myself to ride another horse. It felt like no one could ever take his place. My heart felt shattered, and I didn't know how I'd move forward without him. A few weeks later, I decided to visit the paddock where Thunder had spent his last moments. I leaned against the fence, staring at the oak tree and remembering all the years we had spent together. I whispered to him, "I miss you, buddy." And then it happened. A sudden, strong gust of wind swirled around me. It wasn't just a regular breeze, it felt deliberate, like it was encircling me, almost holding me. I stood there, stunned, and as the wind calmed, I noticed something. The oak tree above me shed a single large leaf, which drifted down and landed softly on my shoulder. Thunder had always loved that tree. He would stand under it for hours, enjoying the shade. Holding that leaf in my hand, I felt a strange sense of comfort, as if Thunder was saying, "I'm still here." A few days later, I was brushing one of the other horses in the stable when I heard it, the unmistakable thud of hooves against the wooden stall door. It was a sound I knew well, one Thunder would make whenever he wanted my attention. My heart skipped a beat. I turned quickly toward Thunder's old stall, but it was empty. The other horses were calm, none of them moving, and there was no reason for the sound. I stood there in silence, waiting to hear it again, but it didn't come. Deep down, I felt it was Thunder. The sound, the timing, it all felt too personal to dismiss as a coincidence, but I kept it to myself. Sharing it felt too vulnerable, and I wasn't sure anyone else would understand. What if they thought I was imagining things? That's why I've chosen to remain anonymous in telling this story. It feels like something sacred, a quiet connection, meant only for me and Thunder. As we come to the end of these stories, I want to leave you with something important to consider. The signs our pets may send after they've passed can often be subtle, a soft nudge, a sound, or even just a feeling. Sometimes when we're deep in grief or our minds are too busy, it can be easy to miss these moments. And for those who do notice them, it's common to second guess yourself, wondering if it was just your imagination. If you've been grieving and feel upset because you haven't received a sign, please know that it doesn't mean your pet isn't with you. Sometimes the signs are quiet, or they come in ways we don't expect. And sometimes our grief can make it harder to see them clearly. Be kind to yourself and try to stay open. You may find that the love you shared with your pet is still shining through, even in the smallest of ways. Remember, whether you felt a sign or not, the bond you share with your pet is unbreakable. Love doesn't fade, it simply takes on a new form. Thank you for joining me for these stories. If you've experienced a moment like this with your pet, I'd love to hear about it. Details on how to share are in the description below. Take care and know that you are never alone in your journey.